everyone. I just want to spend a few minutes using this format to talk about the elements of a position paper. And this applies across the board. You could be in a class on critical thinking, or a class in social ethics, or technology and value, or introduction to philosophy. It wouldn't matter because the elements are the same. And basically, what I'm after is when we look at an issue. Something may be controversial, whether it's animal rights, abortion, something about technology, surveillance, and all those things. And we've prior to that gone over some moral theories that we could use as lenses, as ways of looking at things. And so you have some familiarity with the moral theories, and then you look at read some essays that possibly have opposing points of view. In fact, almost invariably will have opposing points of view. You might have one that looks at something from a utilitarian perspective, one that looks at it from a Kantian perspective, etc. After and we'll have a group discussion, we'll talk about it in class, and then after you've gone through those exercises, now it's time to construct your paper. And what you're looking at here is the elements of a position paper that I look for. And if there's a parallel to something that you have experienced in the past, it might be something in English composition they call a persuasion paper. In other words, it's a paper that you're trying to write expressing a point of view, which we call a thesis, and in that paper outlining a thesis defense. Now, it's an I paper. It's not a research paper. It's not about explaining everything about the moral theories, explaining everything about the issues. Remember, your audience is going to be your instructor, who is familiar with the issues and the moral theory. So what you are doing is advocating. In other words, you're trying to, in essence, sell your thesis based on sound reasoning. So to make this work in the short papers that we construct in my class, that sometimes are 2 to 3 pages, sometimes 4 to 5, depending on whether it's a midterm or final paper. You need to hit the ground running. It needs to be a tight paper. I made the analogy in class about it, being similar to maybe the closing arguments in a criminal trial, when the prosecutor or the defense attorney gets up at the end of the day and gives a hard-hitting, succinct, well-constructed argument that supports their thesis. And so the thesis is clearly stated, as indicated in the PowerPoint, and appears in the first sentences of paragraph 1. This is not a kind of a literary essay where you're going to, talk about your state of mind and the existential struggle that you had in coming to your thesis. Those are all wonderful things, but for our purposes, we have a limited amount of writing space, and we want to devote that exclusively to defending that thesis. So the thesis needs to be clearly stated up front. I'm going to argue that whatever it might be, that the Peter Singer's issue on animal rights mistakenly gives moral agency to animals, and I will disagree with that point of view. Whatever it is, it's just a kind of random example. It's your thesis. It's something that you construct to clearly say what it is that you want to advocate, what it is that you want to present as a thesis for the paper that you're going to write. Now, once you've done that, you're into your thesis defense, and that can take a variety of angles depending on how you want to structure that. Basically, your thesis defense is reasons that support your thesis, and it has to be correlated. It has to have a connection to, obviously, maybe the moral theories we watched and learned about in the videos, or the material, the essays that we've read, or the discussions that we've had in class. So you can't just say, okay, this is what I think, and make it totally a product of your own imagination. I mean, not to say that you can't bring, and I want you to bring in elements that maybe from examples from that you bring to the discussion, some creativity and how you structure it. But it all has to have a kind of balance, because I want to see that you do understand the issues, that you have read the essays that form the basis for your thesis, that you have study the moral theories. So it's not about, again, and this is probably the most difficult thing I think students have. It's not about so much as, well, I want to show the professor I know this, so I'm going to explain it. No, you know it, you understand it, and you just correlate. It means that you bring elements into the discussion. It could be, something like, if we were talking again about Peter Singer, you would say, I do believe that in the foundations of Kantian or virtue ethic moral theory, which requires that a moral agent have the ability to reason, which is not the case with animal life. And the fact that animals can experience pleasure and pain in a utilitarian way does not make them moral agents, because I concur that moral agency requires moral accountability. In other words, you bring the elements of the theories, or you bring the elements of what we've read or discussed into your argument without trying to pedantically explain them as if the reader has no knowledge of this. So again, that's why we kind of make this developmental. That's why the midterm is kind of, I call it a developmental essay, so that you get your bearings on this. And other homework assignments that we've done, I usually have you write something so that I can see if you've got the formula down, you understand what you need to do for position paper. So let's suppose you have that all, you got those elements going and they're going well, and I'm reading your paper and I'm very happy. I understand your thesis. It wasn't ambiguous. It's clearly stated. Your thesis defense is working. You're not explaining everything. I mean, there's sometimes when you might want to, point out a nuance or make a distinction. That's okay. So all that's kind of working. I see a strong correlation with the course text and the videos and whatever discussions we've had. Now I'm looking for a place in your paper, and it can be wherever you decide to place it, where you where you bring forth or you present a counter argument. If you go back to the courtroom analogy, if you're the prosecutor and you're doing your summation and your thesis is the defendant's guilty, and you've presented reasons that support that thesis based on what the jury saw in the trial, and maybe some of your own creative examples that help, to cement that thesis. But you can't ignore that there was a whole other argument in the room. It was the argument by the defense that, in fact, the defendant is innocent, or at least not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And so you have to respond to that. It's not enough just to say, well, some persons might say that animals, as sentient beings, need more than just rights that depend upon what humans decide to give them. Therefore, they should have moral agency, and then just kind of say that's the counter argument. Okay, so now I've done that part. Well, it's more than that. You have to show why that counter argument isn't persuasive. In other words, why that counter argument doesn't overpower your thesis. Now, if all those elements are there, I'm a happy camper. I'm in a good mood, and ready to assign a work if the elements are there and it's well constructed. It's been obviously fine-tuned, and there's not repetition. That it's all kind of hard hitting. It moves at a good pace. That's a work. Now, if you want to take another look at what I've said, where you can read it in more detail in this PowerPoint, I have my faculty webpage there. It's usually in any syllabus that I write, and unfortunately, the Ventura Community College District hasn't updated our web. We don't even have the ability now to update our webpage. It's kind of static because they're still in transition, trying to figure out what format they eventually want to implement. But what is there and that web page is there. It's live, and on the side it does have indicate position papers, and those position papers go over the elements again, and then there's a rubric, a grading rubric, that explains and breaks down in detail what the grading elements are. Well, I'm going to shut this down because I didn't want it to go much more than 9 or 10 minutes, and my little clock says I'm getting close to 10, so I'll let it go down, just as hopefully this has a little been somewhat helpful, and I'll see you all in class, and good luck with your writing efforts.